views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to writers and journalists and editors and videographers and filmmakers and all different kinds of people who are putting things out in the Bronx. And I know a lot of people have been looking at BronxNet television and saying, wow, it's pretty cool. They're all doing their programs, Open and Dialogo and Perspectives and Bronx Talk and the Bronx Buzz. We're doing it from our apartments. And you see it on CNN and you see it on the networks. You're seeing all the people doing their stuff in their apartments. I thought, given the fact that we are the Bronx's a public access cable network, it'd be a lot of fun to go behind the scenes and find out how all this is possible. So we thank Michael Max Nabi for putting the team together of all the great people who've put this technology together. And leading the technical charge is my buddy Carl Peters, who is, let's get his title right, he's the Director of IT and Broadcast Engineering at BronxNet Television. Nice to see you in this context, Carl.
Hey, thanks for having me, Gary. It's a pleasure to be here. This is actually my first time on a show, believe it or not.
Wow, and how many years have you been with us? I mean, I'm the old guy, so I've been here much longer than you, but...
Yeah, no, I got to BronxNet in 2014.
Okay.
So I'm coming... September will be 6 years from now.
When you and Michael Max and others sat together and said, well, listen, we have this terrible virus and this terrible situation, but BronxNet has a mission... what were you thinking about in terms of what you needed to do to kind of put this together so we can have this conversation from a bedroom in my home to your home where you have a little studio?
Yeah, so, the first thing we did was really look at the technologies that we use on a day-to-day basis. So we use a lot of cloud-type, cloud-based technologies, every day. So for us, like email and whatnot, we use the Google Suite, which is really, it's a vast array of product that you could use, such as what we're using now for this interview. It makes it so you can do an easy interview, and then you could, because we're file-based, we chop it up, edit it, send it off. And so we knew that we had a lot of the tools in place. It was just a matter of getting everything to communicate nicely with each other. And that's what we had to really pull off.
So that's an interesting clue, is that BronxNet had been involved, and you called it the Google suite of products. Many people talk about Skype and Zoom and all those kinds of things. What about this technology worked for you and for BronxNet that you said, you know what, this is a good way to do it? And then we're going to talk about individuals like me, and you're literally in people's homes to try and figure out how to do this.
Yeah, well, the nice thing, the first and foremost for Google Suite with BronxNet is that because we are a not-for-profit organization, we get that suite for free from the fine folks at Google. So our email is driven by it, and with our email alone being driven by the Google Suite, we have access to everything else, from scheduling to calendars to different video chats and Google Docs and all those things. So we use those things all the time, and it just is such a natural thing for us to kind of shift fully over to that, as opposed to use a lot of local stuff.
You and I had a brief conversation. I made you hold it so we could talk about it on the show. People talk about, with Zoom, they can use backgrounds, and, Skype may even be a little more familiar to some people. But you were saying there are some limitations and there are some issues in there. Why don't we just address those that made you really settle on this Google Hangout interactivity?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing to really keep in mind is that in terms of what we're doing on a daily basis, in parallel to the day-to-day production, we're trying to find new products and new ways to evolve. So that's the one thing to always keep in mind, is that where Google Hangouts and Zoom and all those products, they meet some criteria, we're not satisfied. We really want something that is much more robust of a network to be able to deliver live programming in the cloud. But to go back to your first part of your question with Zoom and the backgrounds, Bronxites are very, very straightforward people. And they'll tell
Don't I
you
know
if
it?
something, yeah, you've been interviewing for years, right? You know, but the thing that is really amazing is that they just want the information and they want it straightforward. And when you start throwing the backgrounds, it could get a little bit hokey. That said, you got a wonderful set behind you and they get to actually see your home, which is wonderful.
well, well, I have to tell you, my colleagues, people like Rena and Darren and Bob and all, people, Javier, people that I work with and think a lot of. It's been fun looking into their homes. I have to tell you, looking at and even on the networks, looking at people and seeing, what it's like in their homes. But let's talk about the challenge of working with each person. Now, I'm going to show this, and maybe they can edit it on there later. Of course, there are some limits. You got to do some post-production. But you put out this document, which was really useful. I found it useful, which was kind of a how-to. And I was thinking maybe even for the general public, if they want a how-to, if they want to do this kind of thing, now that we're looking at new ways of doing technology. What were the challenges of working with all the people that I mentioned so that they could set up like what I've done in their homes?
Well, the hardest part was really the internet access. So not all internet access is equal. So we had to go through and see who had what and really kind of figure out what the limitations would be there. Because in reality, most people have cell phones. They've got computers with cameras these days. So, and with the Google Suite in the cloud, it's pretty easy. But it's the internet access. So that was definitely the hardest thing for us to get past. That's really what limits us with our live capabilities in terms of what we can do. Normally, so some of our shows like Open in the Morning and whatnot, they're switched live. You have live shows as well. So
Sure.
that's the thing that I think we miss with this. So that's the one thing that I have an amazing team of people. Everyone from Oju and Newton, who is my production engineer, as well as George Ariazega, our systems administrator. George is working on some stuff, and David Wright, our director of web technologies. We really meet every day, which is something we weren't necessarily doing prior to this. We didn't get to sit down every single day and go through some technology and whatnot, and now we're doing that. So as that collaboration, continues to happen and we evolve, and we look at what the other networks are doing as well, we're going to really create some amazing solutions. But I have help. I can't take all the credit.
Well, and listen, I'm thrilled that you mentioned their names because these are people, frankly, I don't interact with them every day because I do what I do and they are back there behind the scenes, and I'm thrilled that you mentioned it. But what this leads me to think of, and I've thought about this a lot, is that all of a sudden, despite all the great things BronxNet has done over the last quarter century, we've kind of opened up new ideas now. Now, you have mentioned you have presumably virtual meetings with all your people. All of a sudden, if this technology is available, God willing, when we get back to speed, you're going to be able to apply not only what we used to do, but now what we've learned, and expand your capability to communicate with people, expand maybe we can handle a project this way instead of the other ways that we used to do it. And even though this is obviously quite unfortunate, we may kind of be stepping into a new way of doing things.
That's really the byproduct of all of this. As unfortunate as it is, and I know everyone's driving themselves, up a wall and out a window because they're bored with this, staying inside and social distancing. That's what's going to happen. We are going to get so much from this that we can apply forward and then use to enhance those daily workflows. So I'm, from a technology standpoint, I'm ecstatic that we've been able to do this because we wouldn't have done it. It just, we're doing things even now at BronxNet that, are cool and they're great ideas and we would have loved to do them sooner, but now there's a sense of urgency on that. One of those things is our BOPAS system. I'm not sure if you've seen that or not.
I need you to say it slowly. So the Bo what?
The BOPAS. So
okay, now I have no idea what you're talking about. So start there.
That's why I didn't give you that info in the beginning of the interview. I wanted to have a surprise for you.
Okay.
So BOPAS, or PAAZ. We'd have to check with Michael Max for the exact, but I'm going to try. Something like BronxNet on-screen informational zone area, whatever. So basically what it is it's kind of, you can see it up in my other side here on my one monitor up on the top. There is a screen that's got like an L-bar graphic. It's got video in it, but it also has social media information, and it's got crawl information. And we whip that up pretty quick.
I've seen that. That's what it's called. Now I got it.
Yes,
right.
yes. So that was something that, we whipped that up on the fly because we knew we needed a way to get information to Bronxites who were looking for good guidance and whatnot.
In this technology. And so it'll be interesting to see how we apply. I mean, obviously everything we're doing now and everything the station is dedicated to is helping us all deal with this, terrible crisis. But then on the back end, it will give us greater capacity to say, well, let's put out more information. It's a fascinating thing that this terrible situation has driven maybe a whole new world. And of course, because of you and Michael Max and the vision of saying, hey, let's be modern, let's, do more. One last thing I want to ask you about is we have two remote facilities. From Lehman College is our, base, but at Mercy College, and then we're opening up in the South Bronx. Of course, that we already did open up a temporary facility over there. Does this apply to all that? And does it help you expand how you look at those remote places? And you got about 15 seconds because we got to run.
You got it. It does. It really, what it does is it lays the groundwork and the network topography for a system that will be state of the art and somewhat future proof in that it'll be IP technology. Wow. As opposed to typical cable. So very, very exciting, Gary. This is going to revolutionize the way you tell a story, the way you interview the whole nine, and the way we distribute it.
Carl Peters, director.
One last thing, though, I got to say before I go.
Be quick.
Be looking out for BronxNet in full HD on Optimum. Every single channel that BronxNet has.
Wow. And well, after all this is done, basically?
You're going to see this in April. The deadline is April. So
listen, we got to run. Carl Peters, Director of IT and Broadcast Engineering, thanks so much. I look forward to the time that I can give you a real high five. But really, we talk about front lines. And listen, nobody takes anything away from the people really in danger. But, in terms of providing communications, you have been on the front lines of making sure that things go great. And here I am in my home. See you later.
Thanks,
thank you, Carl. And we'll be back with a Bronx writer who's writing some great stuff about Bronx culture. Don't go away.
When taking public transportation, don't touch your phone. Carry hand sanitizer and use it immediately upon leaving the bus or train. Avoid touching your face. If someone is coughing or sneezing, move away. Wash your hands with soap and water as soon as possible. Limit contact with poles. If possible, avoid rush hour. Don't eat or drink on public transportation. Keep your bag off the floor or other surfaces. Avoid directly touching turnstiles. Stay up to date with the latest from your local health department and CDC.
Well, I got this as a paid internship. Spending my time here, I really enjoyed the people that work here. I enjoy what goes on behind the scenes.
far, I've learned how to operate a camera, how to host. I learned how to control audio.
My first time hosting was really nerve-wracking, but I really enjoyed it because it was a new experience.
Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz, and let's go all the way. Actually, he said he's up in Massachusetts, although he is from the Bronx, and his work is about the Bronx. Let's say hello to Mwalim. Mwalim, I want to get it right. Nice to have you with us, sir.
Oh, Gary, thanks for having me on, man.
Great. Mwalim, for people who don't know, he's the author of a novel, The Land of the Black Squirrels, which is apparently part of a series. We're going to find out more about that. He's a tenured associate professor of English and Communications and Black Studies at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. So nice to have you with us, sir. First of all, let's just talk about, you ask everybody you see in the street, I may as well ask you, how you doing? Are you healthy during this particular very difficult time for all of us?
Oh, yeah, definitely, you know, trying to stay healthy and stay within the quarantine, social distancing matter of things, but also just trying to stay productive.
And well, then let's get right into that. So productive for you means this book. Now, I think for Bronx people, this is a pretty exciting thing. We're very, very, as you know, interested in our music and our culture. And you look around the round world and you'll find out that we've invented a lot of forms of music. So talk to me a little bit about The Land of the Black Squirrels and you know, why Bronxites would be particularly interested in it.
All right. Well, Land of the Black Squirrels is actually book one of a series I'm developing called Bronx Boheme. And Bronx Boheme is basically stories about growing up as an artist in the Bronx and even continuing to work professionally as an artist in the Bronx. And it's basically, to sort of paraphrase what Jack Kerouac said, it took a year to write and 32 years to live.
That's interesting.
In terms of that experience, because you know, when people, a lot of people now, especially on the global level, when you say Bronx, the first thing they think is hip hop, which of course is one of our homegrown styles. But then there were the styles of music that existed that hip hop grew out of. There was jazz, there was calypso, there was reggae. You know, there were all.
Oh, don't forget my Latin fusion people. Come on, dude.
I was to say, yes. It was, well, actually, one of the main big roots, especially of the breakbeat, is boogaloo.
Yeah.
Which is another Bronx-born form that was, you know, a merge of soul and various Latin forms and the salsa and so forth. So all of that, and, you know, shout out to all my fellow people who used to play at Willie's Steakhouse and the Jams, by the way.
And so I definitely want to get into that. What is it about your own life experience that led you to say, this is something I ought to chronicle, this is something I ought to be doing?
It was my experience growing up in the Northeast Bronx. I grew up in Co-op City. And and also because we had a very vibrant music program in our public school, IS 181, and even the kids who went to Truman had a good music program. And when I was growing up, I went to Music and Art High School. And what I found was that when you're a musician, your world, so to speak, then becomes other artists and other musicians, your own age and even older and so forth. And your activities become very different. Hanging out now becomes going to rehearsals and going to jam sessions, and the type.
I mean, what you're doing there is you're describing life that certainly older Bronxites would understand empirically. I mean, they would get it right away, and that is the life that you led as a young man growing up in the Bronx.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
And so what kind of a story are you telling? Is it a biographical without saying it's autobiographical, or is it a story that you kind of made up and fictionalized through your own imagination?
It's a little bit of each, quite actually. It's a little bit of autobiographical. A lot of the experiences and a lot of the stories in it are things that really happened. They happened to me or they happened to people that I know. And a lot of it, of course, was trying to fit stories together and putting pieces together, because it was a lot of it's for the sake of allegory. It's a piece that older Bronxites can relate to. Folks who grew up in the Bronx in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, they can relate to the stories in the Bronx. It's a story about the Bronx, of course, that's beginning to disappear. But aside from that, it's also just sort of telling a story about, this is the music business. These are musicians. These are the things that happen in the music business. And even though the music industry has changed dramatically, some of the principal elements are still there. So I was trying to make it something that could also be sort of like a lesson for the up and coming artists.
Boy,
and also affirming some of the elements.
That really inspires me. What are those elements? I don't know, pick out one or two that have survived the generations and the decades to bring us to today, to make it relevant even today.
One element are, in terms of being an artist, are mentors. You know, it's one thing to pick up an instrument or a paintbrush and to start painting or to start playing, but then when you have people who actually have that same love and that same passion and pass it on to you, that's a key element. And that's one that I definitely address in that. The fact that we have a Bronx house in the Bronx, the fact that we have a Mind Builders in the Bronx, means that you have those elements in place in the Bronx. And these are things that don't always get celebrated. The fact that we had an Eduardo Cruz who had a Bronx River Symphony out of an AME church on White Plains Road. These are some of the wonderful things that we can experience as young artists in the Bronx. And these are some of the things that the book talks about.
I've got to mention we also have the Bronx Music Heritage Center, which of course is a incredible center for the Bronx, and they're going to be opening up the Bronx Music Hall very soon, and also the Renaissance Youth Center, which has just an unbelievable, world-class music program for kids. This is definitely something that I can, and I think a lot of Bronxites can appreciate. Talk to me about the larger scope of the work. I mean, you had mentioned to me before the show that this is not a one-shot deal for you. This is an ongoing concept.
It evolved. It definitely evolved. The original form of the story was a short story that I told, and then it evolved into a long-form story that I actually told at the New Yorican Poets Cafe in 2003. And then when I had a chance, I actually sat it down and wrote it in novel form. And in writing it in novel form, found that I had more stories to tell than I could fit in a single novel. So I realized, okay, as I started extracting some of the stories from this one, I realized, okay, I already have novel 2 written just what I had to extract out of novel 1, because it was getting to almost be about 600 pages long. So there's so many stories to tell about the arts, about the music, about the cross-cultural influences. One of the stories that I tell in the book is about the fact that being a Mashpee Wampanoag, I learned to fish for herring in Mashpee in the Mashpee River, but I learned how to fillet herring from an Eastern European gentleman behind Building 5 in Co-op City. That sort of cross-cultural thing.
I love that, man. I love that. My reaction to that is, ain't that the Bronx, boy?
That is the Bronx.
I got to ask you about this. I mean, the book is The Land of the Black Squirrels. It didn't resonate to me automatically. Why Black Squirrels? What is that about?
Well, here again, growing up, you began to see black squirrels in the Bronx in late 60s, early 70s. You saw like a couple here and there. But what I began to notice by the time we got to about the 80s were that what you mostly saw, especially around the Northeast Bronx, and then later on when I lived on Webb Ave, I saw black squirrels all over there. And then when I was working at the Point CDC, I saw black squirrels all over Hunts Point and Soundview. So I began to refer to, and a part of this is my native heritage, I began to call the Bronx Land of the Black Squirrels, because of the fact that after a while, you didn't see gray squirrels, you didn't see brown squirrels, all you saw were black squirrels.
That is
so to
wild.
me, the Bronx is Land of the Black Squirrel.
That is absolutely wild. I can't, I've never conceptualized it like that. I've lived here all my life. Never thought to look at the squirrels and get some definition of the borough out of that. So the book.
The funny thing about that is a lot of people who've already read the book and are former New Yorkers, there's a lot of former New Yorkers in Massachusetts and Connecticut, and they bought the book and read it, and the first thing that made them pick it up was, Black Squirrels, this is about the Bronx, isn't it? Because
really? Maybe
it is just such a unique phenomenon.
Maybe I'm the only one who didn't know. I have no. I mean, it's certainly possible. So let's talk about the situation of the book. I mean, you were coming out with it now, and then because of what's obviously around us, it's been delayed. Give me some concept of when people can see it, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, of course, you know, the book came out in February, and we had a lot of touring planned. In fact, I was going to be part of the Bronx Week celebration. I was going to be at the Bronx Art Space,
right,
where we were going to actually do the performance that goes with the book. But of course, all of this was postponed indefinitely because of what's happening. So what I've been doing is I have on Facebook a page called Bronx Boheme. And if you go to that page, I will be hosting writing workshops and also readings.
Very
and
nice.
the writing workshops, because what I found with a lot of my author events, you always get people who come up and they want to write a book. They want to start writing a book and have questions. How do I start writing a book? And it's the teacher in me. I'm like, oh, well, you want to write your book? Well, you need to do this, do this, do this, do this. And so my readings end up becoming writers' workshops anyway. And I figured everybody's stuck at home. This might be a good time to start writing that book you've always been thinking about. So the idea is let's have some workshops and maybe start helping people who are stuck at home with their computer now start writing that book they've been talking about.
And so that's Bronx Boheme at Bronx Boheme for people who might not be familiar with it. And you go on there and you can get instructions on how to participate and do all those kinds of things.
Right. Like April 2nd, we have a workshop at 7:30. That's going to be the first one going live. And then based on how that goes, you know, I might have one every week or every couple of weeks. But if they go on that page, the schedule will definitely be posted.
Listen, in the middle of all this, Mwalim, thank you so much for hitting us right in the center of Bronx culture. We really appreciate you joining us. We wish you, of course, good safety and good health through this whole process. And people want to get in touch with you. Is there an email? Is there a website? How do we do it?
Yes. Well, if you want to follow me on Instagram and Facebook, it's Bronx Boheme. And as Gary just said, Boheme, Boheme. The whole word, I'm sorry, Freudian slip.
Got it.
The whole word,
All right.
Bronx. That is
There
the
you
whole
go.
world.
We Bronx. Hey, man,
Bronx
thank you so
Boheme,
much, Mwalim. We certainly
and on Instagram.
We certainly appreciate your time this evening, and we'll see you around town. Come on down to the Bronx. Let's hang out and let's watch some Bronx music. That'd be great.
Let's do it. I'm dying for a good sabrette.
There you go. All right, folks, that will do it for the Bronx Buzz. We thank our producer, Stephen Powell. We thank all the people at BronxNet who put this technology together so we can continue right along. And we'll see you next week. And on Bronx Talk this week should be a very interesting show. We're going to be talking about not-for-profits in the Bronx. Anyway, good night. See you.